Hey everyone, welcome back to Gaming in the Keats. I'm your host Chris, and this is the round 4 of S1N in Ohio Team Tournament. So to recap here, our captain is dealing with some pretty severe migraines after the end of round 3, and um, Chris, other Chris, and I are discussing, okay, what are our next steps? Like, how do we proceed forward? Do we just drive home in the morning and try and beat this winter storm that's forecasted to come through the area? Do we talk to the team in the morning and just say, okay, it's just going to be a three on three if that's possible, or we talk to the tournament organizer? And so Chris and I are strategizing on what are our next steps, and then who's going to do the pairings if our captain James can't make it. And luckily, we've all taken notes. We've all gone through the pairings, so we have a pretty good idea of how to do it ahead of time. And as it turns out, James rallies in the next morning. He took some painkillers because painkillers fix everything, right? So he's able to do. We kind of decided, okay, let's just do at least the morning game, and then see how things turn out from there. And so James, thanks to James for just pulling it out. Way to go, man. For at least sticking it through. So we got for our round 4 matchup coming up here. We are playing the Bruise, and this matrix actually looks pretty good for us, all things considered. We have quite a few greens, a fair amount of yellow as well, and only one red and one orange. You'll see the stars in the matrix that are sort of the notes of how the matchup can change depending on who goes first. And then our captain James again pulls through, and he's able to get us 3 green matchups here. And then he himself gave himself the most difficult yellow in order to get us these 3 greens. So, he's just James is already MVPing it here. So, with that, I'll jump into the lists. So I'm not going to go into my list too much, but feel free to pause it, or I go into my list in more details in the first round. But yep, we got the Darkhide shenanigans here. So for my opponent's list, he's got 2 vampire counts and a courtier. Both the counts, one will go into a big unit of barrow card, and the other will go into a big unit of ghouls. Speaking of which, he's got 2 ghouls. He's got the barrow guard, of course, with the +1 to hit banner. He's got a cadaver wagon, so all that infantry gets that nice fortitude save. 20 zombies, which is where the cadaver wagon will go. And he's got 2 little units of vampire knights for scoring purposes. The one vampire, so that count with commandment, the Lamia one, will go into one of the units of ghouls, and or is it? No, excuse me, I apologize. No, the commandment one goes into the barrow guard, and then the hypnotic pendant one, the Strigoi, goes into the ghouls, hence, Ghoul Lord. And here is the deployment. It's going to be in circle, and then the secondary is capture the flags, which I think actually works out for me in my favor, because I can target those small little units of the vampire knights, and I don't necessarily have to engage those big ghoul units if I don't want to. My opponent won the roll for sides and got to choose whether or not they were the attacker or the defender, and my opponent actually chose the defender in this matchup, and we'll see how it ends up affecting the game. For my magic choices, I have the Hereditary, Know Thy Enemy, Stars Align, and the number 6 spell, which is the name is eluding me here, of divination, and I usually find that the 6 spell works pretty well against vampires, just because it makes those cheap little healing spells, if you cast it on their unit, just much more, it's more annoying for them to try and heal up their units. Makes it more difficult because it makes their units MR3 to their own spells, which I think is pretty funny. I'm not sure if that's actually the right call in this matchup, specifically considering my overall game plan, but that's the spell I chose. And then the Maul took Whispers of the Veil and Spectral Blades. For my opponent, the 2 counts, his general has the Arise, of course, and then Ancestral Aid and Spectral Blades. The Occultism count has the Hereditary, like the Heal, and then the Breath of Corruption, and then the Courtier, the Baby Vamp, has, of course, the Hereditary as well, and Swarm of Insects. So, we'll see how we get on there. Okay, so I definitely had this matchup as a green. I'm not saying it's a big green, but for me, it is. I know it's a green because not only am I really, really familiar with playing against vampires and how their units work, but my list can really out-deploy them and envelop the vampire list because my opponent's footprint really isn't that big. And so essentially I don't have to engage these big blocks if I don't want to. And if my opponent does try and push me, I have enough speed and maneuverability to combo charge a particular unit if I want to. So my opponent does have to be careful about pushing me. And then because it's flags, I also have the speed to be able to get to those little units of Vampire Knights without having to push my Succubi or the Clawed Fiends forward if I don't have to. So that's sort of my plan, go for the Knights. I estimate it being a 13 because I do feel like I can get one of those Knight units and then I don't have to engage anything else. So therefore, it becomes like a 13-7-ish. Assuming I get the objective and I don't do anything stupid. So those are my thinking. Those are my thoughts there. From left to right, we got on my side a unit of Clawed Fiends, Bloatflies, Succubi number 1, the Maw, Succubi number 2, Furies, Bloatflies, and then the Courtesan. I deployed her back here to try and avoid being swarmed turn 1. You'll see whether or not I actually achieve that. And then, of course, I already mentioned this, but my opponent chose the defender side and chose the castle up into this right corner to try and prevent me from enveloping on one side and just kind of relying on the fact that I have a lot of ground to cover here on this left side. So my opponent did give me the big flanks, which I does think play into my advantage, especially knowing that I'm not really going to push too far aggressively until I know I have a really good counter charge, a really good combo charge situation. So for my opponent, we have the Vampire Knights. This unit here is the ghouls with the count in them. So they have the 5-up they have the 5-up poison. That's what it is. Here's the Barrow Guard with the commandment. Here's the zombies with the cadaver wagon. Here is the other unit of ghouls with no character, and then the final unit of Vampire Knights there. So that means so if my opponent... No. You know what? I think I messed this up. I think I was the one who chose the sides. I think... Oh my goodness, why would I give my opponent the hill? I don't know. I can't remember, but either way, I know my opponent goes first, and I got the encircle. So that's what we have so far. My opponent's turn 1, you can see as such, just some slight moving forward here. Unfortunately, I was not able to do this 100% well, so my opponent was able to get a swarm of insects from the Courtier or at least, yeah, able to see the courtesan a tip right here. So that's on me of making sure that I couldn't just get swarmed of insect turn one. Personally, I don't really care if my opponent puts it on the maw, because I can always try to heal up the maw with zombies if that needs to be the case, because my opponent doesn't have any other form of chaff, and that means that they will have to summon some zombies, and at some point, yes, I will try and heal up my maw. That being said, my opponent is able to raise up some zombies right in front of me here, well, within 12 inches here, and I dispel Swarm of Insects. Okay, so with my turn one, I'm pushing forward a bit and starting this whole maneuvering around the flank process. Oh yes, and then to clarify, here's some ruins, forest, field, water, hill, impassable, and then we got a cute little fence right there. So I'm making sure that these Vampire Knights don't have a charge onto my Bloatflies. The Clawed Fiends are just making their way downtown here. I am giving my opponent maybe an 10 or 11 into these Bloatflies here, but I'm familiar with this fight before, and it could be one of those things where we might just end up killing each other, and so if my opponent does commit into here, I can trap that knight unit with the courtesan if they happen to survive from all the toxic hits. I know I'll take some punishment from the knights on the charge, no doubt, but because it's committing a scoring unit, I know I can get them, and I don't think my opponent wants to take that charge. And also here, I believe I'm setting this up so that if my opponent charges in, my plan is to get perhaps a Know Thy Enemy up on the courtesan, so he's hitting me on 6s. So either way, and I don't charge the zombies because that's just putting me a bit too danger close at the moment to all of these, yeah, the ghouls and the barrow guard, and one unit of succubi certainly cannot take all of that punishment. And here I do push up the Furies just to make sure that the ghouls don't have anywhere to go, because I did want to get close here and put pressure on this little knight unit, but the ghouls with a rerollable charge, even if it's double 6s, I don't want to give my opponent that chance. So, yep, that is how it works. And then in the magic phase, my opponent stops a spear onto the knight unit, and I'm able to get off. It's either Know Thy Enemy, or it might have been the 6 spell onto the courtesan. I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but I also get off a Guiding Light on the courtesan as well, just in case something weird happens. In my opponent's turn 2, the ghouls charge the chaff here to get rid of it and activate their Unholy Appetite. The Vampire Knights back up. My opponent's trying to cover angles here, and trying to cover his flank with from the impending Clawed Fiends and Bloatflies maneuver, and then my opponent just moves up the zombies right in front of the succubi. I dispel Swarm of Insects in the magic phase, and nothing else of note happens. My turn 2. So the maw charges the zombies. I elected to not charge the zombies with the succubi because that was a flank and it was just putting me way too close to these big scary blocks. The bloatflies moving away so that the ghouls do not have a charge on them. I think that's that's like right above 16 inches there. It's possible that the ghouls might have a 12 into the succubi. From the looks of it here, the center of the ghouls unit is probably on the hill, so he would have a rerollable charge there into the succubi if he wants to take it. So that being said, I probably should have backed them up just a hair. In other news, these succubi moved around to maintain this sort of C-shaped battle curve to keep my line intact. And also allow for counter charges to come in if my opponent does want to go in. But again, I think I'm not even giving him a charge. I think I'm respecting these units here. And also, the Maw may or may not kill this unit, which is kind of what I'm banking on, because then it makes it for a really awkward charge with his Barrow Guard unit into the Succubi with this Impassable. Again, but just from looking at it, I don't feel like I gave him a long charge or not, but I can't tell from this angle. The Clawed Fiends are outside of charge range from the Vampire Knights, and are again continuing their trek around the flank. Same with the Bloatflies. And then you'll notice here the base of my Courtesan. So the Courtesan's out of line of sight of the ghouls, and I'm basically saying to my opponent, sure, charge the Courtesan with the Knights. I'm going to get them. I'm going to try and get up a magic buff so that, again, you're hitting me on 6s. And as long as I stop rerolls to hit or rerolls to wound or one of those, then I should be in good shape to get this unit. So that is my thinking there. And because the ghouls, depending on... Oh, yeah, and here, if the ghouls... They could have charged, which might have allowed for a charge from this unit of zombies. Oh, and you might see there's I think that's the baby vampire with Swarm of Insects. I think that distance is also probably too far away from this unit to charge the Courtesan, so I placed her. I was pretty happy with my placement with her here. And then, of course, she's magnetized, so I moved the model physically off onto the Impassable just to make sure from the game to the right of me, which was our Captain James in the Demon Legions game, that no bumping of models would occur. And then, yes, in the magic phase, I do believe I get off a Spectral Blades onto the Succubi unit, and I also believe I get off a Know Thy Enemy onto the Courtesan, and my opponent stops a Spear of Infinity, and perhaps one other spell. I think my opponent stops Stars Align here. So, yep, that's what it's looking like at the moment. I'm feeling pretty happy about it. And what I failed to mention in my opponent's previous magic phase, they did get up another unit of zombies, the dice indicating how many of zombies there are. And then you can see here that the Maw kind of fluffs a bit. Like, I think I rolled like a 1 or a 2 on the Thunder Stomp, and like I was rolling 1s and 2s all over the place, but I did enough to put 3 wounds. Like, I raised 3 wounds on the Maw, so the Maw is now up to 12 wounds. And now I'm starting to think, like, this is probably pretty good for my opponent, because if he just throws zombies into the Maw, he's hoping that the Maw just blows himself up, which I think is actually it's a good play for my opponent, but I still want to at least eat this unit now with Succubi, to hopefully prevent that from occurring. But yeah, I'm kind of thinking, like, maybe it wasn't a great idea to just charge the Maw into zombies. Okay, so no charges from my opponent. Instead, what they do is they set it up so that they move the Knights right in front of the Courtesan, and so if I'm to hit with the Courtesan here, any overrun I do would, if I did a combo charge with the Bloatflies, and I moved as far as I could over to this side, I think I'd need an 8 on Swift Stride to get out of line of sight of the ghouls. Or more likely is I'd have to overrun with the Bloatflies and hit the ghouls to stop them from having a counter charge on the Courtesan. It does give me a scoring unit potentially if I choose to take this maneuver, but in the end it's trading in the Bloatflies and also might lock down my Courtesan, because I know that I really don't want the Courtesan going into ghouls, at least in the front. It's just not a good look. All that poison just kind of over time, I think, grinds me down with only 6 HP on the Courtesan. So, in other news, the Maw, I think I'd choose to not charge the Succubi here. I think I'd choose to just let the Maw just eat zombies. Sure. Oh, wait, excuse me. No, this is my opponent's turn. What am I doing? Okay, yeah. So, my opponent then is just backing up as far as they can, trying to prevent me from outmaneuvering the ghouls. And yes, I do believe in this magic phase, my opponent does get a Breath of Corruption off and takes out one of the succubi here. I stop Swarm of Insects, of course, and so I think my opponent does get off an Ancestral Aid onto this Barrow Guard unit, just in case. So, yeah, that's how it is looking there. And in close combat news, the Maw actually goes to town, eats the zombies, and I think I gain another wound back. So I think the Maw's up to 13 at the moment. So yeah, that's how it's looking like at the end of my opponent's turn 3. So the only charge I make in this turn is the succubi into the zombies here. I pass my march check, although I think I didn't even need to march, I was within 9. But what I end up doing here with the courtesan is I put her in a situation where the Barrow Guard cannot see her. The ghouls can see her, however they cannot charge past the knights. They can't hit her first and then make me close the door. They'd hit their own unit no matter what first. And so what I do here is I back up the bloatflies 19.1 inches away from the knights, so the knights don't have any sort of legal or viable charge. So that way his own unit is chaffing his ghouls. Now I'm threatening the flank of the Barrow Guard, or potentially, I mean, if I want to, I guess I could skirt through here, depending on the situation. Or depending on the space, and maybe go after that baby vampire, but I doubt I'm really going to do that. And then you can see on my left flank, so the Clawed Fiends and the Clawed Fiends and the bloatflies are out of line of sight of the ghouls. And then what I'm telling my opponent here is saying, okay, I'm going to threaten your flank, and I'm going to threaten this knight unit with my bloatflies. If you charge me, you need maybe maybe a 10 to get into one of these Clawed Fiend units. If you get through the bloatflies, and then I'll pounce on you with the other one. And so I'm essentially saying I'm going to take out your vampire knights with this maneuver here, because again, I've done this fight before, and usually the bloatflies and the vampire knights just kind of kill each other. And because this is a scoring unit, I'm happy to take that trade all day. So that is my thinking there. I think I get off another Spectral Blades, another Know Thy Enemy, or the 6 spell onto the courtesan to make her MR3. Again, I can't remember which one, but I do have a Guiding Light up on her just so she can more likely to pass her march check if I need to bail out and around one of these units here. So that is my thinking. And then, of course, the succubi do quick work of these zombies, no problem. Alright, my opponent's turn 4. My opponent does take the bait into the bloatflies, so I'm happy about this. I believe, let's see, I probably stop a Swarm of Insects here, or maybe my opponent fails it if this was the MR3 spell. I let go Ancestral Aid onto the Vampire Knights, and I made sure to stop Spectral Blades so that there's no lethal strikes, so no matter what, I'm getting my toxic hits onto this unit. Yeah, and so other than that, my opponent reforms the ghouls and the knights to make sure that my courtesan can't sneak past and hit this unit here, nor can she really, I mean, she might be able to, no, I doubt it. I think my opponent is able to block off this little gap here with the vampire knights, so my opponent is trying to trap the courtesan, and so it is a bit risky for me, because even though I have a Discipline 9 minimized, it's still a failable march check. However, I know even with 9 inches I can get outside of line of sight from the ghouls, not a problem. and then I can still angle myself in a way to be in front of the Vampire Knights. So again, saying like, okay, I'm gonna get, if you charge me, that's fine. I'll eat your unit. So that's how it's looking here. And this went better than expected, to be honest. My opponent charges in, does a bunch of wounds to me. Not only do I make about half of my fortitude saves, my toxic hits just go nuts and like do 4 wounds to his Vampire Knights, and then the Bloatflies just finish off the Vampire Knight champion. So he did 6 wounds to me, but it didn't matter. So I got the scoring unit, and now I'm like, okay, got it. Okay, I don't need to do anything else now. Go Bloatflies, good job. So I just need to conserve their points. I don't need to commit or do anything, again, stupid, hopefully, and not giving up a unit. So I am feeling good at this point. And so I don't have a picture of my turn 4, but what I essentially do is I take a timeout and I ask our captain, like, how is everyone else doing? I already know that our Dwarven player is probably going to get a 20 against the Vermin Swarm player. So I'm not sure how the game with the Highborn Elves versus the Warriors of the Dark Gods is going for us. But with James's situation, he's losing and he's just trying to conserve points. So at this rate, our captain just says, again, don't give away any scoring units. You have the objective. You don't need to do anything else. Just back away and force your opponent to have to make a decision then. And so that's essentially what I do. On my turn 4, I move the courtesan in a way so that she's out of line of sight of the ghouls, and is threatening this little knight unit here. And I just move, again, out of line of sight of the ghouls. I back up as far as I can so he can't charge me. And yeah, this is how my opponent reacts to me. He reforms and comes out this way now to try and threaten one of my scoring units and try and get a Breath of Corruption off to get down this Bloatfly unit to half points. And then he puts the Vampire Knights in front of the courtesan, again saying the same thing. If I charge in, he can trap the courtesan with the ghouls next turn. So, and the courtesan is worth like a lot of points. So, yeah. As you can see, I do get off some spells on the courtesan, and my opponent is able to get off a Breath of Corruption, I believe, and I dispel Swarm of Insects, and so unfortunately I think my opponent rolls really low and is not able to do any wounds onto the Bloatflies this turn. So my turn 5, that's essentially what I do, is I disengage, I pass my march check, and just peace out with the courtesan, peace out with the Bloatflies here, still facing them just in case he wants to try and get some points or if he wants to do anything froggy. You can also see some zombies have popped up again in front of the succubi to block a combo charge with everything here. My opponent is now, I think, giving me a flank into his goals, at least with the maw. And then, unfortunately, I don't think I could have flown past his line of sight with the ghouls, with the Bloatflies. So I had to pull them back, which in turn meant that I backed up the Clawed Fiends as far as I could when I reformed them. However, it is giving my opponent a double 6 in order to charge into them from closest point to closest point. I did my best to get out of there, but that is what it is. I'm just hoping my opponent fails it. If my opponent makes it, then like, oof. Then he's probably going to get the Clawed Fiends and tie the objective, and then potentially even get the Bloatflies, and that's really, really not good for me. If my opponent fails, however, he's presenting a flank with the Maw and the Succubi. So, yeah. We'll see whether or not my opponent takes the opportunity. I think my opponent was able to get off another Breath of Corruption here, and again, he does one or two more wounds to the bloatflies, I think just one, and is not able to... Oh wait, no, excuse me. Oh my goodness, I'm jumping ahead of myself here. So that's my turn here. I get off one of the MR spells. I think I get off the MR spell onto the Courtesan, and then that is it for my magic phase. In my opponent's turn, my opponent does attempt the double 6 charge, because I think ultimately his thinking is, I'm not going to get through the ghouls enough to get half points for them, and it's absolutely worth the risk to try and get these two units together. So he does fail the charge, and that does present a flank with the succubi. I think the maw is chaffed from this unit of zombies here, so I can't get in with the maw. And then my opponent does back up, but he did give me double 6s with the Courtesan into this unit. So I think this might have been a mistake on my opponent's part. I think he could have just reformed them and turned around and moved the full 7 inches to prevent me from even potentially charging into them. And then, yes, my opponent does get a Breath of Corruption off onto this unit. However, this is where my opponent, again, is not able to get the wounds needed to get half points for the bloatfly, so that was a bit unlucky on my opponent's part there. And my final turn. So I'm looking at the table to my right, and I see that James's game is not going well, so I said, let's go. I mean, it's my last turn. There's no risk here, so I go for the charges with the succubi into the flank of the ghouls, needing an 11 on Swift Stride, and they make it, and as you can see, the Courtesan makes the double 6 into the Vampire Knights. And I felt bad for my opponent there, just because it was just like, that's such a, that's just, he missed his double 6, and then I make my double 6 in the end of the game, so it's just kind of like, oh man. But that happens. It's dice. So, and yeah, there was no risk on my part to not take it. And then my opponent, this is when I think my opponent has a Dispel Scroll in here, so my opponent uses the Dispel Scroll on Spectral Blades onto the succubi, stops Whispers of the Veil, and I do believe I get off a spell. I think I get Stars Align up onto the Courtesan, and then we'll see what happens with the combats. Okay, here you have it. You have the succubi into the flank of the ghouls, and yeah, they do a number on the ghouls, but with that 5-up fortitude, my opponent is able to save a fair amount, and I do not get half points for the ghoul unit as correctly predicted by my opponent. And then in this combat here, I choose to not issue a challenge. I ask my opponent if they do want to issue a challenge, and of course they do. And so I kill the champion, I do the overkill, but I don't do enough to crumble the unit completely. So this Vampire Knight has 1 wound left, and so therefore I get half points for the vampires. And there you have it. That is the end of the game. And there you have it. It is a victory for the Demon Legions. Finally, I get a victory in this tournament. I'm pretty happy with this result, just because I felt like everything went as predicted, and I didn't take any substantial risks. So my opponent got the Furies from my army, and then I got 1 unit of Vampire Knights completely, and then half points for the Vampire Knights. So not a high-scoring game in terms of casualties or points or anything like that, but with the objective, that's a 3-point swing. And that half-point unit of Vampire Knights tipped it from being a 13-7 to a 14-6. So I will absolutely take it. Thank you so much again to my opponent. I had a lot of fun this game, both my opponent and I did, and yeah, it was a great game, even though it was a very, very tactical game, very cagey, but still, this was a great way to start day 2 of this tournament. So thank you again to my opponent for such a good game. Okay, so my post-game thoughts here are, I'm happy that I actually stuck to my game plan. When we took notes on the matchup before the games, like when we were driving up to Ohio, I pretty much had a very finite idea of how I wanted to play this matchup, and so I'm just happy that I followed my actual plan. Yeah, nothing too crazy happened dice-wise until the very end where I made those charges. So I'm happy about that. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I think my spell selection absolutely could have been better, just because if I knew that I wasn't going to engage, I might as well have doubled up on, say, a Spear of Infinity, or have taken Unerring Strike to try and do some rage damage and pressure those knight units a bit more earlier on. But c'est la vie, I chose the spells that I did. And admittedly, with this matchup, I was just super happy to not face a lot of ranged damage, magic, or shooting. Oh my god. So this was the matchup that I've been looking for in this tournament. So I am happy to have received it. Again, thanks to our captain for giving me that matchup. And then also, with the micro aspect of the game, I am very happy with how I played the court. I was making sure she had her guiding light up so I could, pass my march checks if I needed to, but also was able to figure out, even if I didn't, to position it in a way where I was preventing any sort of entrapment from my opponent's side to get her. And I was still able to just disrupt his lines with the courtesan. I was able to envelop as predicted with all of my movement. I did the best that I could. Making sure that I was not giving my opponent any charges, or making them incredibly risky either way, or making them double sixes or something to that effect. I think I could have just charged the zombies turn 1. I think my opponent was actually rather afraid to come forward to pressure the succubi, just given all the potential combo charges I had, but as well, I think my opponent also has had some PTSD from playing succubi in the past. I think we had a conversation about this after the game, and so he's not a fan of succubi whatsoever. So I do not blame him for that. But I do think it may have been possible. Had my opponent had more chaff in his list, I think he absolutely could have pressured my lines more. But that was not to be the case in this matchup. So anyway, and yeah, I got some lucky turn 6 charges. I'm happy about that. I'll take it. And it got me a point. So yay! As how our team did, however, this is a victory for the Brews. We had 2 matches go expected. So my match and Chris Wynn's match. Chris got the 20 against the Vermin Legions. I mean, with 2 flamethrowers and an organ gun and all of that shooting, just absolutely wrecked this list. My match went as predicted. However, unfortunately, there are some things in this match that didn't go James's way. And so this went worse than expected, and then this was supposed to be a green, and I know something crazy dice-wise happened in this game that completely flipped the match, but I can't remember what it was for the life of me. So this did not go expected, and that being said, it makes it a Brews victory. So congratulations to the Brews. Thank you again for such a great game. It was a great group of guys to play against, and yeah. That is the full match. And thank y'all for watching and making it all the way through the video. I really appreciate it. Like and subscribe if you're feeling it. And yeah, Blitfly is MVP with their toxic attacks. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed it, and round 5 will be coming up after this. Ciao, ciao for now, y'all.